Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Hold on, some bunch of stuff's falling over in my office.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another off-season episode of Third Degree, the podcast. This one is titled, is it 290? Is that correct, Buzz?
Yeah, 290.
God, I thought it was more than that. Okay, to episode 290 of Third Degree, the podcast. Unfortunately, the good Dan Crooke is not here. I'm not sure why. Are we telling people why Dan Crooke's not here?
Well, he's ill. I mean, we can say that under the weather.
Okay.
Hopefully he's better soon.
All right. He didn't choke on his beard or anything, did he?
God, I hope not.
God.
That's why he just worked himself too hard.
Yeah, probably. So everybody, when you kneel down by the bed, have your prayers, leave one for good old Dan too. And there he is, your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer himself, the good Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hey, thanks for coming back after a week off. We could get the band back together.
Did we miss anything?
No, because we're all waiting around for the Eric Quill press conference. And then this week, now that they've had that press conference this week, is a bunch of league activities and team activities. And we probably will see some action, even though we're not going to have a podcast next week or on next Thursday. But we will get to all of it eventually.
It's okay to go on vacation for two reasons, Buzz. One is you deserve to go on vacation and enjoy yourself. And two, that actually causes things to happen.
It does make things happen. And then when I come back, we'll have plenty to talk about afterwards,
right,
rather than a week of nothing.
Yes. So as you mentioned, we were sitting around waiting for the official Eric Quill press conference that happened today. No, I have not watched it because, Buzz, after almost 30 years of watching this team, I feel like I've watched the exact same press conference more times than I can count. I'm going to predict that Dan and Clark talked about saying the right things and fitting in with the club vibe and all the right things that you want to hear on the day that you present a brand new manager like they've done for the last 7 times before this.
Well, I think it sounds to me like you've seen it, you watched it.
No,
that's what it is. That's what it always is, and it's,
I didn't watch it because I knew exactly what was going to go down. And that's, I could almost repeat it word for word.
Yeah. Well, they say the same things, they say this pool of outstanding candidates, interest from all over the world. And then
how much they appreciate the previous manager.
Oh yeah. Peter, they love for Peter was everywhere. Peter Luxon was everywhere, and fair enough. That's all real. They say, the new words that are, coming out since the end of the, Nico Estevez era is this thing that, that MLS is this unique league and different league, and how there's all these crazy rules, all of which is basically kind of true. And that plays into why they really are interested in MLS experience on some level, whether it be as a player, an assistant, or whatever. So, they putting some qualifiers on there, all these great candidates they have. And they seem really excited. They've got their guy, and there was a lot of genuine happiness on display and smiles. And, I would like you to, if you can at some point, Peter, I would like you to watch it, because there's some, other than things are being said, I think you'd have some comments about the whole thing in general, but we'll talk about that later, after you've actually seen it.
Or are you talking about production value issues?
Yeah. Not even just that, but like general issues along those lines. Or just,
I never count on this club to be able to put any kind of production value into anything, because they don't give them the tools to do it. Anyway,
let me just start off the whole thing. But at the end, they did a photo session where they dug out one of Quill's jerseys from when he played for the Burn, and nobody ironed the jersey.
Yeah,
it's been in a box since 2004.
It probably was unwashed too. It probably smelled like Eric Quill circa 2006 or whatever it was.
So it looks like it's been in a box since 2004. So it's
did Dan Hunt bother to shave and shower before this press conference?
Yes, he had on a lovely tie, the only one wearing a tie, and then one little corner of his collar was caught on top of his jacket instead of being tucked and sort of stuck out like a
Did
he's our lovable Dan Hunt. We love him.
Yeah, he's our big old teddy bear. Did Clark actually dare to show up?
Yeah, he did. He was there. He did the opening, because he's the man. So he had the opening statements, and he said, some stuff at the top about how excited they all were. And listen, I know you're right. A lot of the platitudes are the same.
They were excited about Nico and Lucci and Oscar.
Of course they are.
And all those people.
They're always excited. But some of the key, what we do when we watch these things is we look for the key words, and because the key words sort of give us some sense of direction, and we can take some of those keywords and
culture.
Well, no, not that one. Everybody always says that. Everyone always says culture. Everyone says
attacking
mentality.
Football.
Yeah, attacking football.
Okay.
But we can get into some of the details.
Solid in the back.
Because team defensive cohesion. People are gonna watch the team play, and you're gonna know they went to war. All that kind of things.
Exciting football.
No, nobody said that. People said get forward fast.
Not even Dallas won't even bother to say exciting football.
Dumber the ball. I mean, your miles may vary on what's exciting. But the things that were in there that were interesting were, you remember when we walked out of the Nico Estevez press conference in hire, we were like, man, is that the right guy? Because he didn't say the things that align with the club philosophy. Whereas this time we got the paradigms that align with the club philosophy, which is this, we're going to play some youth. They're excited about North Texas team, and a couple of the guys coming through for that. So wait
a second. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Because I got to be honest with you. I don't know what the club philosophy is in 2024-25. I honestly don't know what it is anymore.
Well, it got derailed over the last couple of years, but they want to get back to that era. Dan Hunt talked a lot about how their tradition of producing national team players from the academy, and I mean, they're definitely all back in. They're saying, and so do we have to wait till we have to see actions to follow up these words? Well, of course we do. But, when we see these words, we can say, well, okay, so now we're going to talk about the team going forward as if what they said, this is the direction we're just going to go. Okay, what does that mean? And so we'll start talking about how this will all come out in the wash as we go forward. If you want to talk specifically about Eric Quill, again, like he's saying all the things that are coach speaky, and you've heard them all before. And if we can talk about the things that are different this time, he talked about how when he left, he specifically went to the Crew to play for a coach who had won an MLS Cup, who has coached in a different system that had different player profiles. Eric was trying to expand his resume and his horizons in terms of being a coach. And then he talked about going to New Mexico because he wanted to be in charge somewhere and sort of run a whole organization at a pro level, and be not where he was the second team coach, but the first team coach. And so he talked about those development pathways and how when he left, he, told them being Dan, most predominantly, that like, I'm going to go get all these resume things because I'm going to come back here someday and work for you, and how much he wanted to do that. And I'll go a step further. And Eric Quill told me years ago, like when he actually left, he very specifically told me, and I'm assuming that he told me because he wanted me to tell the story someday. He didn't just tell Dan Hunt that he was going to come back here someday. He specifically said to him, "You're going to hire me and I'm going to win you your first MLS Cup." And he said that when he left to Dan's face. So it's that kind of mentality that he sat there in that press conference and he said, "I'm not afraid to say that we're here to win championships and all those kinds of things." So that's slightly different, and I really appreciate that. And he talked about how when he was at New Mexico, he was still watching like every SC Dallas game and scouting SC Dallas, and he's very, very familiar with this roster already because he's been watching every single game for 3 years now. So that's all kind of exciting as far as that goes. This is a guy who didn't just want any job. He specifically wanted this job. And like, you remember when the Nico Estevez press conference happened, he said he talked to Bearhalter about the couple of jobs that they were open. He was sort of interested in any one of them. And they kind of decided that maybe that Dallas might be an okay one. Whereas Quill was after this job specifically, since he played here and came up as a coach here. And as he put it, they've invested in me twice previously, and now they're investing in me in a third time. And that means a lot to him. And he generally had a smile on his face. And so that part of it was a little bit different than what we've experienced before. That felt more like Oscar coming home, vibe than we sort of got even from Lucci, because Lucci was already in the org and was just moving up, right? So it's this guy coming back who has the bloodlines and all that stuff. It was kind of nice. That made me feel good about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that you've got a good, I don't mean to use this word this way, buzz about the situation. That makes me happy to hear. Like I said, every time they hire a new manager, everybody gets excited about that guy and and wants to be feel like changes are coming. And we talked a lot about who we wanted to get this job. You personally, Buzz, not only predicted a long time ago this is who would end up getting the gig, but even when there were other bigger names available, you stuck by and said, no, this is the guy that I think I would like to see get the job, deserves the job, and would do the job the best. So, when it comes to this stuff about this club, there are very few people that I trust and their instinct on, and you're probably at the top. No, not probably. You're at the top of that pile. So, I think that he is. Again, considering all of the limitations that are placed upon this club by the people that own it, he is without question by a mile the best option for them to have hired.
Yeah.
And so I am pleased that they made that decision. But you and I both know that they could have hired Emma Hayes, Pep Guardiola, Bruce Arena, and built and made an army of the best football managers in the world and brought them here as a collective. They were not going to get anywhere until they figure out their roster problems. And Andre Zanata in particular learns how to do his job well.
I don't want to double back down onto that whole flexibility, thing that we came up in the end of season press conference that we all were just like, you got to be kidding me. But, it's going to take someone like Eric, we hope, or even the new TD that's technically underneath Zanata, but maybe more directly involved with playoff, not with style of play or way of play, or maybe more directly involved with getting out and scouting and finding players than Zanata. Zanata seems to be moving more into just the deal making part. It's going to take somebody coming up, I think, with some focus, and you hear Eric talk, and he talks about very specifically like the style that he wants and very specifically the mentality that he wants. Now, lots of guys do that, but he's particularly focused. It seems like there's guys that you run into in the coaching ranks who sometimes you kind of are like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And then you meet guys that you meet up with and you're talking to them and you're like, oh yeah, no, that's there. Yeah, let's go. And you just get excited talking to him, and you sort of think, man, this guy really gets it and understands it. And I suppose for everybody that's different, but I can think of times in the past where, like when we came out of the Nico press conference, we were like, boy, is that the right fit? And then we came out of the Lucci press conference, we were like, man, is it too early? I can think back to when Colin Clark got fired, still one of the dumbest decisions they've ever made. And they hired Steve Morrow. And one of the first times I was talking to Steve Morrow, he was like, oh, we were kind of trusting the wrong players. And I'm thinking to myself, man alive, you just went wire to wire first place as the main assistant coach on that team. What do you mean you guys trusted the wrong players? What are you talking about? That was a team that needed a tweak, not an overhaul. So sometimes you just find guys that you just believe that they have it, and for me, like even when Eric first came here with North Texas, when I first started having conversations with him on a coaching level, obviously I've known him since 2004. It's just all the time. And maybe that just means like, did he agree with me? I mean, maybe I'm being that kind of arrogant, but at the same time, like you believe guys and you watch the way they interact with players and you watch how players react to them. And so I feel very, very good about this hire and very, very good about this guy, as opposed to when I haven't really felt like this since Oscar got hired, to be honest, was the last time.
Well, that's good. And hopefully it all translates again.
Yeah.
It all comes down to how well the front office handles their business this offseason in terms of adding, dropping, changing, correcting the course of this club through its roster, because the roster, Buzz, the roster's a mess. The mess of a roster that existed, for all of last season, which was close to being one of the worst seasons this club's ever had, has not changed very much. You have brought up and documented how it's going to be difficult for them to change it dramatically.
Yes.
And there's a likelihood it could be very similar in February to what it is at the end of last season. So they gotta work that stuff out.
Yeah, specifically in regard to that. And again, they can say one thing, but doing it is another question. Zanata again today mentioned multiple center backs, which is correct. They need a starter and they need a depth piece at least, if not more than that. And then he talked about this week being the expansion draft and the one-day trade window. And he said some things will happen with that. And then he started to say they're already lined up. And I don't think he really realized he wanted to say that. And he kind of was like wishy-washed it on the end. But now I'm expecting some things to happen, with the Monday's the one-day trade day. So, it seems to be like, if you're talking about bringing in, he again talked about how excited they are to bring in these players they've got lined up, players plural. So we also on this podcast talked about the idea that the people they said they're still talking to that were on the team fill up their roster. So if you're also talking about these other pieces, something has to give. Either you're not getting all those guys you said you're still talking to, or you're going to be jettisoning some other pieces some way, or else you can't make these moves you're saying you're going to be making. So again, you're right. They have to produce. They have to get guys that can get it done. They're saying they're going to, and if they get guys in whatever position they are, if they get guys that can produce like Petter Musa has produced, that when healthy, Alan Velasquez looked real. I liked Sho Kafumana since he's come in. If you continue to perform at that level, we're all really excited about what you're going to do. Now, if you give me more Ennis Solis who don't look like they are up to it at this point, then we're going to have more issues. So
right.
Lots of work to be done. From Quill talking about a couple of guys at North Texas, how are they going to fit in? This doubling down on the youth initiative, as always, he said, it's going to take a little time to overwork, lots of work to be done. And that's true. Like if you want to play like Quill wants to play, which is this high intensity system, you're going to have to get guys that can run and move. And there's a couple of old dudes around here who can't run and move.
Did they talk about any other pending changes, like the staff and things like that?
Quill didn't want to talk about his staff much, other than he confirmed that Michelle Garbini will be joining his staff.
Michelle?
Yeah, the Michelle.
Will he bring his left foot with him?
Well, I'm sure he will in practice. That's the only name that he confirmed, which means that the North Texas job is now open. He did not mention any other coaches. I mean, I know that I'm quite positive that Drew Keyshawn, the goalkeeper coach, who's one of the best in the league, if not the best, will be kept around. Kevin Martinez, we know, is not coming back.
What about John Gall?
Well, John Gall's the real question. They did not specifically mention John Gall. We know from various people the organization is very high on him. The easy move is just put him back in charge of North Texas Soccer Club. The thing with Michelle is Michelle was Eric's assistant when Eric was at North Texas. So he obviously was like, that's the guy I want him. So they've done him and he's over the finish line. And then he mentioned a couple of other guys are not across the finish line yet. So can we assume John Gall will be on the staff? I mean, I would bet, $100 or whatever that John Gall will be with the organization, whether it's on Quill's staff or whether it's taking up the reins at North Texas again, which makes a lot of sense, except normally you don't go backwards, but I could see them saying to him, hey, we want you to have head coaching experience, not be Quill's assistant, go coach pros, because he was with the academy. And think about how many times we've said, you go to academy to assistant, you're not ready to be the first team guy. You need to coach guys as the main guy. And he only did 4 months or 6 months or whatever in North Texas. So not the end of the world if he takes over those reins again. He's really good, in my opinion, of progressing guys along the pathway John Gall is, and has done really well in the academy with that, even in the first half of last season with North Texas. So that's just, your guess is as good as mine where they'll put him. Hopefully it's something important because he's a pretty good coach.
So in the press conference, did they talk about anything unrelated to Quill, specific to Quill? Like, did they talk about the stadium renovation or did they get into player acquisition at all in any detail?
No, they didn't. People tried to pin him down a little bit on tactics, and he dodged that with we're still formulating how we want to play.
I don't know. I don't know what players he's going to give me.
Yeah, I mean, at least like he's not starting cold turkey. Like him talking about having scouted every FC Dallas game, being very familiar with the roster. I got the impression he walked in with a list and said, "You can get rid of these 7 guys or whatever." He already knew what he wanted. I think the key words are, um, the verticality and the aggressiveness, both in winning the ball back fast, wanting to dominate the ball, wanting to get forward and attack quickly. He mentioned by name Petar Musa, Alan Velasco, Bernie Kamungo. Bernie, a shout out, so that's going to be a big deal. He was there and found Bernie in the first place.
Do you think Bernie's like the most excited, happy guy on the roster?
Gotta be. I mean, Nkosi Tafari played for him too when he was there in North Texas, but Bernie's got to be the one that's got to be jumping through for joy the minute he heard Eric was going to be the coach. That he's got to be ecstatic. The only name that did not come up very much at all that I can think of was Jesus Ferreira. Surprisingly, no one mentioned.
Were any of the players at the press conference?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I was watching it on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So there could have been 10 of them there for all I know. And, I wasn't in the room, so I couldn't tell you that.
Would that be weird if none of the players attended it?
I mean, it would be a little, but it's certainly not all going to be there. I imagine some of the young people or people that he had a relationship with might have been there. They most of them have gone home, for the holidays or for the winter. So it'd have to be people that were in town. Certainly that could be Bernie, for example,
Martin Paz has been gallivanting around Indonesia, having a tropical vacation with his supermodel girlfriend on Instagram for the last few weeks. So that's been fun to follow.
And Asir Yarmini's been doing all the American, national park bits. I've seen him doing, the famous, whatever's Grand Canyons, this is and that's, it's so most people probably have gone unless they live in town here. They probably are not around, obviously.
Right.
A lot of them do live here, but a lot of them went home or went to wherever, back to Europe, as you say, or.
So when now that Quill's here, and obviously, as you mentioned, there's some roster stuff that happens between now and end of next week. When do they officially start getting back together? Is it not till after the first of the year?
I don't think that's been announced yet, but it'll probably be the second week of January.
Okay.
Because and different teams start at different times depending on whether you're in the CONCACAF Champions League or not. Obviously, FC Dallas is not in that, so they'll have a later date. But basically they're going to start playing at the end of February, beginning of March. So you're going to have like 6 weeks. So that's like second week of January. So if I had to guess, I would bet like the weekend of like the 11th or the 10th, 11th maybe of January might be when they're getting back together.
Okay.
Somewhere in that week.
And speaking of players posting photos of vacation, I did see Velasco. Now, I don't know if these are current photos or not, but he appears to be back down in Argentina again.
Yeah.
And
I was told he went right away.
And then since we last did this, the specter of him being traded or being bought by an Argentinian club, I think Boca, came back up, reared its ugly head again. And are you hearing any noise? What's the latest on that whole deal?
Well, every 6 months that gets reported, and it was reported again. It was also poo-pooed again, by various people. But, when it comes up that often, it's very clear that someone is trying to get that deal to happen.
His agent.
This is his agent, I'm sure. We've seen how fast he runs back home. The kid is definitely homesick all the time. That's fine. I give it that he can do that, and if the bottom line is as long as he's under contract, unless the price is right for FC Dallas, they're not going to sell him. It's like, it's going to have to be.
But nobody is going to give them anywhere close to what they paid for him. He's coming off an injury. He's been good, but he's not lived up to any of the expectations that, they set for the fans, and he kind of set for himself from the first game. It all kind of leveled out after that.
Yeah, if you look at his numbers for like his last season in Argentina, they were insane, and he does nowhere near that here. I'm totally believing now that the MLS is harder than Argentina to play because guys from here go back that get crap out here go back down there and do really well, and Allen has not produced like he did now. In terms of goals and assists, he has not. And you're right. Like this minute, like I'm sure if Boca were actually calling right now, they'd be like, "Oh, they gave you like $3 million for him," and everyone would laugh because that's not happening. So he's gonna have to prove that he's back to where he was. And last season, he was getting better as the season was ending, but he wasn't back to where he was when he first got here. So he's going to have to prove some stuff if they're going to get a price for him that will match what they value him or paid for him. Granted, as time goes on, if his contract's running out, then you would take less if he's not performing and you're in the next to last window before he's free. So, things could change, but that's not now.
Yeah.
So it's not.
And when we talk about this roster being broken, one of the biggest problems with it is two of its biggest, most expensive attacking stars are two players who we all have this weird, and I'm just going to be polite about it, suspicion that neither one of them really want to be here in Ferreira and Velasco.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And you can't, and neither one of them, in Jesus's case, it's because how much his salary is. Nobody wants to take that on. And in Allen's case, it's, well, we just spent $8-9 million for you. We got to get something back for you.
Yeah.
They're not easy to get rid of.
No, they're not. And nor would you want to, because if you're dumping one DP, you got to have your work cut out for you to upgrade that spot. I mean, it's one thing to sell Jesus. It's another thing to say, how do we replace that in terms of pure value? Obviously, when you have a luxury like Logan Farrington, then you don't have to replace Jesus at the same position. You can replace his DP with, maybe you can use it at center back, or I think you should use it as a 6. If you're going to play the way Quill wants to play, you're going to need a 6, intense 6, not like a casual 6.
Right.
Like you're going to need a Carlos Grezzo or Daniel Hernandez, that kind of, probably even more rangy than Hernandez. He wasn't super rangy by the time he was done. The other thing to consider, I think, too, is that if you think back to Quill's teams at North Texas, he used, the two Rodriguez brothers, both David and the older one, good grief, who's now, with the Battery in USL, but he used a playmaking 10-ish kind of player underneath there. And really they only have Velasco in that kind of mold. You could probably use Leggett in there, and then maybe if you want to, maybe that's the way you start the season, with Velasco wide until you figure out if Bernie's great again or not. Or maybe it's got to be, they bring back Delgado to kind of use in that spot. They don't, if you're not going to do Velasco in there, it's not necessarily a great fit. So, I think that's probably part of what Quill was talking about, maybe in the terms of like, we're still trying to figure out how we're going to play, is because they don't necessarily have the exact same pieces that he might ideally want, that exactly fit the way he might ideally want to play.
Well, interesting stuff. I guess the best way to do it is just hope for the best and wait for the new season to kick off here relatively soon.
Yeah. At the end of the day, when you walk away from these press conferences, you just have to sort of listen for the things that are, it's all coach speak, but you have to listen for these slight variances that give you a hint into the way you want to play. And there was a relatively high amount of talk about intensity and winning the ball back and dominating the ball more, and not like a casual, like sit deep. I mean, everybody says defend as a team, we're going to fight. We're going to, we're going to cohesion. We're going to all bond as a team, like those are the things everybody says. So you just try and pick up on those key phrases, and it does not sound like it's going to be like a 5,000 pass Lucci ball. It does not sound like it's going to be a low block, waiting for the other team to turn it over like it's been the last couple of years. So it's going to be different, it sounds like. So we'll see how Eric goes.
Well, I guess my question is, you probably better than anybody that I know knows Quill's systems and setups and expectations from his players.
Yeah.
If nothing, other than what we think may change in terms of the roster, obvious things like Dante Seeley not still being here, or Omar and Gonzalez not re-signing, those types of things.
Right.
Could he make his system work with the players that are on the roster right now?
Yeah, I think so. It's the real question is going to be,
okay, wait a sec. Is when you make it work, does that make them a playoff team, an MLS Cup contender?
Oh, no. You're not going to be a Cup contender in year one. I think you can make the playoffs though.
Well, God, I hope so. They let more people in than not.
If they don't, that would be really bad. There are some things that he likes that, in my estimation of what he likes, which is this combination of real athleticism, like American style verticality and pace. He mentioned guys that have been here by name, Tanner and Brian Reynolds, these American freaks of athleticism, right? He likes that, but he also quite often likes, you remember I told the story about he was a player that Ajax wanted. So, soccer skill really does matter too. It's a combination of those two things. Again, his teams in North Texas were combinations of guys like Pappy up top and Reynolds and Jogo on the outside in various versions of the teams. This flying wingers that Oscar sometimes had, but also these Rodriguez brothers who could, dribble the ball around and beat people like that, of which Alan Velasco fits that mold, that little quick bursty hitting guys on the dribble kind of thing. Loves a guy like Bernie Camugo with that verticality, like had sixes, like you may not remember this guy, a guy named Jota, who could cover sideline to sideline with massive range and crush people. So it's a combination of some of the systems we've seen here before, probably most similar to Oscar's in terms of its combination of verticality and ball skill. So, it's a real mix of the kinds of players that he's interested in. And so there are lots of pieces like that here. But then I would look at things, you can look at any player and think to yourself, okay, if that guy's not really good with the ball, or he's not really quick, or maybe he doesn't have the this never say die mentality that Eric also likes, it's like, are those guys going to be in the mix? Like the big one probably is Asir Armendi. Does that guy have he has the engine, like he runs the most miles, right? He has the ball skill, though that's all really great too. But does he have the range? And you probably have to say to yourself of Kafumana as well, also in that same position, does he have the range? Like, so you can't really play, I don't think you can play a single pivot. Well, that's okay, because Quill mostly plays a double pivot more often than not. Mm-hmm. So, some of those things all align. The real question is going to be like, who's going to be the playmaker that's going to be like, it's not a pure 10 anymore. We all know that, but who's going to fill that position on the field? He likes those wide wingers that are going to run at people. So you're probably looking at like a more traditional wide front three, like a 4-2-3-1, and not those inverted wings that we saw the last year with Nico Estevez, when their wings weren't really wings. They were really sort of 10s underneath. Right. So, that's why I think Bernie will probably excel. He's probably going to want outside backs that can run the whole line, having specifically mentioned Brian Reynolds today, so like, okay, does Marco Farfan fit that description? Not really. Juan might. Okay, no, maybe all of a sudden we really do want him back, because that is that vertical outside back that Quill is talking about, So you can look at the pieces on the roster, and if you've watched Quill enough, you can think back and like, okay, there maybe some interest has changed in whether we want this guy back or this guy not back. Like I look at Delgado and I think, I don't know that that's a Quill kind of player, because he kind of drifts around in games. He does have that burst forward and get a goal thing, but he doesn't really have like that string pulling 10 kind of vibe. Like, remember, we didn't know he was a 10 until Nico told us, right? So it's like, there's some priorities may have changed on, what players out of contract they care about, and what players from North Texas they might care about. And, and I think that they're not going to be thinking about super short term. Like, obviously the goal is make the playoffs. That's the minimum, right? They've said that, bare minimum, make the playoffs. But I think they know that it's going to take a little bit to turn this roster over to make it fit for Quill, because he's different than Nico. It's a very different style than Nico for sure. So
yeah. It's bare minimum, make the playoffs. Reach for the stars, kids.
Yeah, well, that's the minimum, not the maximum. Look, we know there's no way you're competing for MLS Cup with this roster as it is now.
I know.
You have you have a couple of good starting pieces. So like, to me, like, you look at this roster and you go, okay, I imagine a guy like Quill is going to say like, yes, you can overturn in this league quickly. I look at the LA Galaxy, you can go from nothing to one of the best teams. You can, but you have to be able to jettison pieces and bring in pieces.
So have you seen the tweet back on December 1st that Tom Bogert related to this put out
No.
about the roster building of the Galaxy and how they turn this thing around?
No.
And he's right. And I'll just read it to you. It says, here's the roster evolution over the past 3 windows. It's a masterclass in roster building with crucial signings, both big and small. And it goes through, and it's, it's all broken out by position, and it's remarkable. And you're exactly right. Yes, a team can very quickly in MLS go from worst to first, but you got to be, one, smart enough to know how to do it, and 2, have owners willing to spend the money to do it.
Yeah. In this particular case, like, you have to look, what matters the most are DPs and U22 initiatives, TAM signings. Those are the big impactful pieces, right? If those pieces are just okay, your team's just going to be okay. And that's what Dallas is right now. So you have to look at those pieces and you go, okay, how do we optimize our roster? Where do we have redundancies? What kind of money can we purge? And let's say you decide that because I have Farrington, I can sell Jesus Ferreira and use that DP spot somewhere else. Okay, great. That's the kind of the way you could turn your roster over in a big way. Then you can look at, we're spending a bunch of money on Paulo Arriola, who's a right back or like a second choice wing at this point. Okay, how do I move that? Well, that one's tough. That's hard. Paul's a great guy and a great leader, and if you have him around here, he'll be an awesome attribute for sure. But if you're talking about getting to compete with MLS Cup, that's a boatload of money that maybe could go, for example, to a stud central mid. Like, you've got Alan Velasco, so now you need to support that. I mean, Armindi's going to be 35. Kafumano's 25. Okay, maybe there's a piece that can go in there with Kafumano, a show. Now you're looking at center back. Can I use a TAM center back? Well, I already got a TAM center back in Ibiaga, but I need like a starter grade, and then maybe Ibiaga and Nkosi can compete for that second spot or something like that. So, you have to be able to use money in a cap league in a wise manner, in the sense of it has to produce. You have too many misses on the U22 initiatives, for example. Have any of them hit? I mean, we kind of think Giovanni's a hit, but I'm now terrified that he actually is out even longer because of the fact they're interested in Juan at all. Like, why would they have cared about that guy if Giovanni wasn't a problem?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really worried about right back in terms of what you're going to do. And if you can't afford to overspend on Juan just because Giovanni might be out for a bit, you have to think bigger picture than that. Because what happens if you give TAM money to Juan for the next 3 years? And then all of a sudden Giovanni's back and you're like, oh, stuck with that contract. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of pragmatism has to be taken into account. You can't just go all in next year. You got to go kind of in next year, but with an idea of like 2 seasons probably, because you can't turn, like when people are like, how did Miami turn it over so fast? Man, they set that up for 3 years, knowing that Messi would come available and knowing that like everybody had to be free at that time so they could give the entire roster out if they needed to. They clearly set that up way in advance, and this is not that case. This is not set up way in advance.
Yeah, you're correct. They did do that, but there's also another element to that, is they have an owner that is willing to be creative and spend out of his mind, above and beyond, what the cap allows for, to put that kind of roster together. Now,
you have to be able to spend to buy out guys and also pay contracts. Like the Patrick Musa contract is kind of exciting. That's a bigger one than we've seen in a while. The biggest one they've ever had was Franco Jara. We'll show you how that worked out. So you got to get it right too.
I'm not suggesting the Hunts should. I know they would never do it, but I'm not suggesting they should go the Inter Miami route. I'm just saying that's how those things are done. I mean, I don't never expect this team to be either one of the LA teams or New York or Miami. It's just not going to be.
And they're not going to, because they sat in that press conference today and talked about youth. The academy.
Yes. And, and I don't mean to be the total pessimist here, but I'm going to go ahead and put my pessimist hat back on. This newfound romance back with the youth thing also coincides with them having a stadium that's going to be 50% closed for the next 3 seasons and all the lost revenue that comes with that. So, it's okay. I mean, I don't mean, okay, that's a little too easy to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that I think the best we'll probably can hope for in terms of the Hunt spending more money might be to actually keep a couple of these homegrowns and not sell all of them. I get that you're not gonna be able to not sell Pappy for 20 million, but like keep a Testament, keep a Reynolds, maybe, like keep some of those guys. They've kept Jesus for a little bit. That's more of that kind of thing, and then these great players you're producing will actually benefit your winning in the league a bit. Like we talk about Ajax all the time, right? Like they sell all these crazy players for huge money. They also win championships along the way with them. That's what you want. You want to keep them for a little bit, enough to get yourself a championship or two, with the understanding that when the $20-30 million player comes along, that one we can't afford not to sell. But the rest of them we're going to try and hold on to a little more, and not sell so fast these guys for $500K or $1 million. You know what I mean? Like keep a Chris Richards for more than 5 minutes. You know what I mean? He never even made it on the first team roster. He signed mid-season, so they loaned him out, and then by the time the winter rolled around, they sold him to Bayern for like $3 million. And regretted it for years.
Who is I can't believe I'm blanking on this, but this is also indicative of just how quickly these things come and go. What was the name of the other center back that insisted on going to Germany, and they let him go, and he's essentially disappeared?
Justin Shea.
Yes. What happened to that dude? Why isn't he back here playing center back for this team?
He signed in. They sold him to... Is it Westerlo? And then Westerlo loaned him down to like Division 2, and then he got hurt. I mean, he's gone. He ain't gonna come back here. He didn't want to come back here.
God, what a waste.
Yeah. Well, the backstory on him was that he had family from Germany and gone there every summer and spoke German and all that stuff. And, he's the reason I think that the Bayern deal died, because he went to Germany and went to Bayern, and he got his head turned. And he's like, oh, I ain't coming back. You know what I mean? And FC Dallas was sick of their players going over there and then going, oh, we're not coming back. We never want to come back. It's like, they got tired of that. So I think that's what killed in the end, that's what killed that deal. Because they refused to sell him to Bayern for chump change like they did Richards.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of reflective of the comments from Tim Howard and Landon Donovan about Giovanni Reyna on their podcast, talking about why everybody goofs on MLS. But Landon makes a very good point. He'd play 300 games here if he was playing in MLS. Now, I know if Giovanni Reyna announced he was returning to MLS to play for NYCFC, the mind melting that would happen in U.S. soccer would be apocalyptic, but that could be the best thing possible for that kid.
I'm not certainly a Gio Reyna expert, but how come that kid gets benched by every coach he plays for? I mean, at some point, doesn't people start to wonder what's going on?
Yeah, anybody that knows, he is a young guy who's easily injured, probably doesn't play hurt, right? He's not willing to play when he's hurt, but he does get injured often. And he's just kind of he's one of those good dudes. I mean, sometimes I think people forget the rap that was on Giovanni Reyna as a youth player.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, well, of course we do, because we've all been around the block for a long time. But there's a lot of people who are pro Giovanni Reyna that didn't know anything about him when he was playing in the youth system, and everybody hated his guts because he wouldn't pass the ball to anybody.
That's right. He would never. We used to talk about that with the U17s.
Yes,
he's not going to pass the ball.
Yes.
Pappy, stop waving. He's not going to pass it to you.
Right. Exactly. So it's unfortunate that those kind of things happen. I don't know how we got all derailed on that. All right. Anything else FC Dallas specific before we move on to the other topics of hand? That's a lot about nothing, to be honest with you.
No, I think it's all good stuff. This is talk radio, man. That's what we do. I think that Zanata flat out was starting to say, or maybe even finished the thought, that like they had some things queued up related to the expansion draft. Like I took that as, a player move or two, maybe on Monday, in order to sort of like set themselves up going into the expansion draft on Wednesday. You know how that is. Sometimes like you might trade a guy and then say, okay, no, don't take anybody else. We'll trade you this guy for nothing. And you don't draft somebody from us, right. That kind of thing. So like I said, I now expect something to happen on Monday, and that will of course set up like who you want to protect or not protect on Wednesday. I think the list that I would put it together from my personal who I would protect will probably be different than the list the club will put together, but that'll be fun, to think about over the next couple of days as we get closer to that. But really that's it. Like, then you get into the stupid things like the actual free agency windows where you could actually re-sign your own guys, like A.R. Mindy, for example. And then the re-entry stuff when the younger guys can get picked up and waiver thises. And so in the next week, you're going to see the potential for some small minutia to happen. And I think really, but between now and let's say Christmas-ish, you're going to know whether guys are going to be get re-signed or not. Because honestly, like I said, second week of January, you're probably looking at your camp opening. Other teams are already announcing guys. So like you got to basically, and if you take out Christmas, you basically have 4 or 5 weeks to get all this stuff done. Including the college combine, including the super draft, because you're going to show up in that second week and be ready to go. So we're going to see some stuff in the next week or two. I hope. If we don't see anything, I'm going to start to be worried, but we should see some stuff, And remember last year we were all about where's the moves, right? We've been saying for 3 years now, maybe even longer, maybe back to when Zanata got hired, where we see this slow sale of a best player replaced by somebody slightly worse again and again and again and again, and this slow wearing down of the talent. And every single offseason we said, if you stand pat, you'll get passed by people in the league. And this team has gotten a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And then Nico Sevas got here and they went boom, 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 and went and got 3 or 4 pieces. Yay. They got really good up to 3rd or 4th in the West or whatever it was. And then they got worse and they got worse and they got worse. You can't stand pat. You have to do some stuff. So, okay, let's do some stuff. Let's not stand pat. Just changing the coach is not, like you said, you can't just change the coach and bring back the same 25 to 30 guys and expect it to get any better. It's like,
all right. Well, we'll see you after Buzz gets back from vacation. Maybe everything will be different. Everything. All right. On Saturday on the radio show, we have 2 Trinity players coming on. It's their last home game of this calendar year, and they asked us if we would help promote it. I said, of course, we'd love to help. So Sam Estrada and Sarah Henson are coming on. And, I feel like this is a team that has drawn its way to 3rd place. And I know they've played a game since we last talked, and they've got their game obviously on the 8th. And then this is where we get to test out how this winter schedule works in the United States too.
Yeah. They've got 2 games left in this fall window. And then they start playing again in February, on February 15th. That's when the spring section starts up. And they'll have 2 games in February and 4 games in March. And so we're about to witness, 2 games in December, about as cold as it gets here. And then a gap. And then mid-February, as probably for us here in Dallas, things start to crack a little bit in terms of getting warmer. Although still, of course, February can be pretty bad weather-wise. But Dallas, honestly, is probably an ideal market to play weather-wise, to play a schedule like the rest of the world does. The real place to watch it, of course, is for the northern teams of this league and see how they fare in this time of the year and how they're going to fare in mid-February. There is this gap, this winter break. It's like, it's about, let's see, is it a month? No, it's 2 months. It's about a 2-month break. And that'll be kind of it. That's a big break. So that'll be interesting to see how the teams sort of retool, because that 2-month break is really aligned with when things like the NWSL or college has breaks, right? Like the college season has just ended. The NWSL season in February will just be getting going. So there's kind of like this window to do stuff, yet you're still playing this winter schedule. It's not like a 2-week break. It's a 2-month break. So it's going to be fascinating to watch, because MLS Right is talking about this. They're throwing it out there to everybody. Oh, we're considering this. USL, and this is a USL league. They're looking at this too for all of their leagues. Like, should we change the schedule? So,
man, those games in February at the Cotton Bowl are going to be colder than a witch's tit. And you and I both know this.
Yeah. Well, then I just watched the Buffalo's Bill play and Pittsburgh Steelers play, and like, the
major snowstorms,
and everyone's cool. Everyone's like, this is football. right? I mean, why not?
I guess. Sam Meza was named USL Super League Player of the Month, and Gracie Bryan was named to Team of the Month, and Madison White was on the bench for Team of the Month. I think I'm reading that correctly.
Yeah, it's like Team of the Week for MLS, where you get a couple guys on the bench.
Right.
So USL Super League does of the month instead of the week. So, Madison White had a couple pretty good, like 2 shutouts out of 3 games, so she made the bench. And Sam Meza, like we said relatively in the season, because she plays a really pivotal, flashy sort of position, ball handler, assist maker, goal scorer, like underneath, she's talented enough that she's going to be in the MVP conversation. We predicted that early, and she's delivering on that. She's a fantastic player. Not their best player, but, might in the conversation.
And the last thing, I saw that you tweeted this out because I didn't even know this was a thing. So, I mean, I know that the McKinney team, the Chupacabras, are launching next year. It is next year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they announced the other day that they're going, because I guess there was a lot of questions. I think we all assumed they were going to the NPSL, but no, they're going to USL. I didn't even know there was a USL 2.
Yeah, that was actually my third assumption. I thought my first guess was they would go to this new thing, this league for clubs, and that NPSL would be the second choice because Denton and Vaqueros are both in NPSL. And at that level, and Hitch is the one that explained this to me, at that level, travel costs are massive. So I was really surprised to see USL 2. USL 2 has been around for a long time. The team here with Texas United, do you remember that name?
Yeah, was it called something else before USL 2? Is it the old UPSL?
No, UPSL is something different. That's still around.
Okay.
USL 2 has been around for a long time. It even predates USL 1 by a long shot.
Texas United was a USL 2 team.
It was.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just hadn't been paying attention. All right.
Yeah, it's been around forever. Maybe even back to like the last day. I'd have to look. Don't quote me on that.
Here's the deal, Buzz. You and I know this. UPSL, NPSL, League of Legends, USL 2. I threw in an arcane reference for you. They're all just glorified Sunday pub leagues.
Well, USL 2 specifically is college kids only. It's like the Cape Cod League or like AA basketball, where it's something for college players to play on in the summer.
And not lose eligibility.
Although
now, with NIL, I don't know if that even is a thing anymore.
Yeah, it's weird. There's things that are happening now in college soccer that are mystifying to me. I don't want to say any names, but there's a guy that played under contract for North Texas who's now playing in college, and I don't understand it. But in NPSL, you can have both kinds of teams. You can have teams that are college only, but you can have teams like the Vaqueros were when they had like Jamie Lovegrove and some of the guys that are on the indoor teams were on the more semi-pro-ish. It has to be one or the other, but you can do both in NPSL. So,
but this is why I'm confused. Why would you not put this team in the NPSL so it could compete against Fort Worth and Denton and Lubbock? I mean, it just seems. Yeah. I don't understand. Like, you have the opportunity to build a network or a league of Texas-based towns or city clubs and compete against each other, but you've decided to take this one and not even put it in the same league. That makes no sense to me.
I'll explain it even worse. Well, first of all, there's some real cracks in the facade of the NPSL. There's some real problems happening there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not an expert on it, but I know that teams are bailing on that league.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of just horror stories. But I've heard horror stories about NPSL, UPSL.
Sure. Well, UPSL is to lower level than that to me. UPSL is a national amateur league. It's different.
Fair. Okay.
So I asked Hitch specifically why USL 2, and I said that's a lot of travel costs, and he said yes. I consider it an investment in the travel costs, and then he said what he really liked was the regional style, the regional play of it. Which is weird because there's no teams in North Texas for him to have said that about. In fact, the league they stuck him in is the league that Texas United was in, and it's all teams from Louisiana and Mississippi and Arkansas. So it's like you're going to have to travel a couple of states over to play all the time. So what they tend to do is they go out and play 2 games in a weekend and then come back to like a Shreveport,
And you know how hard it's going to be to build a quality roster to get guys that would have the time and availability to show up and play consistently when you're traveling like that.
Well, Texas United had the best record in the USL2 like 2 years ago. They got some really phenomenal talents because Dallas is a hotbed,
right?
And people want to come home and play for the guys from here want to come home and play and stay at their parents' house. Right. So they're able to do it, but you're still talking about a van league. You're riding around in a bus or a van. So and the weird thing is like they put him in that conference. There's actually teams in South Texas there's a Texas South that has like some teams in USL2 in it. Like, so like why they put him back in this other league that I didn't work is like, listen, there's some stuff there that I don't totally understand. What we're going to have to do is watch Denton and watch Vaqueros because Hitch has some fingers in all those pies. So stay tuned for what those other teams are going to do. So maybe that's a different landscape in a couple of months than it is today.
Yeah, don't get me started on Hitchcock having his fingers
9
in all.
Teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's the shadiest thing. Not shady's not the right word. It just seems weird. I don't know.
I think of it as an economy of scale where like you're grouping all these teams under partially under one business structure, and you're saving yourself some money that way. Like he saved himself a boatload of money by doing all the kits. Like his little shop there does all the kits for those teams. So he's parlayed all that into like in a Hitch way of like this hand scratches that hand. You know what I mean? Like
that makes sense. That makes sense from a business standpoint, but it makes zero sense from a competitive standpoint for all the obvious reasons. Having one person as an owner and multiple teams that are competing against each other just is weird. And
well, they're in different leagues and they play different teams. Like this is only USL 2 team.
Yeah.
And one of his teams in California is in the league for clubs and several others are in NPSL and they're all run independently as near as I can tell. So it's not like what's going on with the Outlaws, which is this whole different ballywhack over there.
All right. Anything else, Buzzard?
Oh goodness. The academies are having one of their big tournaments this weekend. It's called MLS Next Fest. Doesn't matter what it's called. It's all the MLS Next. This names are all stupid. The Academy names are stupid. The MLS Next Pro stupid name. But the tournament, it's a big one. Where they bring in some foreign clubs. Like one of the Dallas is playing like Barcelona, like the real Barcelona on one of their teams. And anyway, they play a bunch of high level games in a short period of time, like a cup tournament. Big scouting for college scouts, big scouting for pro scouts, international scouts. It's a big boondoggle of soccerness that's out in California this weekend. These are games that really matter. When you're smoking some team from nowhere, like 9-1, nobody cares. But when you're playing Barcelona and it's 1-1, now we care, right?
Right.
So these are big, huge games this weekend. And coming out of the backside of it, I'll have my my winter signing watch list for everybody from the Academy.
All right. Well, Buzz, enjoy your vacation. There will be no pod next week.
Yeah.
No,
but that's good. Like we said, that means things will actually happen inside Football Club Dallas. News will break, and we'll put it out on the socials and maybe on the website and all that stuff. So we'll keep
that actually
posted.
gives us like there's 5 or 6 days that are going to involve player movement over the next week and a half, and like we'll come out of the back of that with the next podcast on the 19th, and we'll bundle it all up into one big, hopefully juicy episode of movement and not a whole lot of nothing.
All right, kick ass.
That'll be what we're talking about too if they do nothing. I guess.
Well, I hope Dan's feeling better. I hope you have a fantastic trip coming up, and
Thanks,
with pictures and stories to tell when you come back. And we'll be in a couple of weeks we'll talk to you then, man. But
yep.
All right, very good. And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fans. Those of you who continue to be curious, you are the brave ones. We will speak to you in a couple of weeks on another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
Get better soon, Dan.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.